Daniel never planned for anything extraordinary to happen in his life. He was just another young man in a quiet city, working long hours, eating leftover noodles, and coming home to a small, half-empty apartment that echoed with silence. The days felt heavy all the same, so when rent went up and he couldn't afford it alone, he decided to find a roommate. That was supposed to be simple. He posted an ad online. Room available. Must be clean, quiet, and okay with late work hours. He expected a normal reply. Maybe a college student, maybe someone new to town. But the message he got the next morning was strange. It read, "I am a foreign exchange participant. I require housing for 6 months to study human relationships. Payment will be provided on time. I am quiet and adaptable." Daniel shrugged. Study human relationships? Probably a psychology student, he mumbled. He replied, gave the address, and forgot about it. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, everything ordinary in his life ended. She stood there, tall, slender, wrapped in a gray coat that shimmered faintly like mist. Her eyes were silver, bright as moonlight, and her hair shifted colors like the sky before sunrise. For a moment, Daniel thought he was dreaming. "Hello?" she said softly, her voice calm and even. "I am Lyra. You are Daniel, correct?" He blinked. Yeah, hi, you must be from the exchange program?" She nodded once. "Yes, I come from the Interspecies Exchange Council. I have been assigned to live with you to study human bonding and emotional behavior." Daniel froze, trying to process her words. "Interspecies?" he repeated. "You mean, like, you're not from here?" Lyra tilted her head slightly as if trying to mimic confusion. "Not from this planet, no. My people are from Celestis Prime. We were told humans welcome cooperation." For a long second, Daniel just stared at her. He could hear the refrigerator humming behind him, the clock ticking on the wall. And then, out of pure shock, he laughed nervously. "Right, of course. My new roommate's an alien. Totally normal." Lyra's silver eyes blinked slowly. "Is this humor?" "Yeah," Daniel said, rubbing his forehead. "I think so." She stepped inside, looking around the apartment with quiet curiosity. Every little thing fascinated her, the old sofa, the window blinds, the dusty books. She touched objects like they were alive, as if each one carried meaning. "This is your habitat," she said softly. "I can feel traces of emotion here." Daniel watched her carefully. "You feel emotion?" She turned to him. "Not like you. But I can sense it. It is part of why I'm here. Humans are complex. You feel joy and pain from the same source. I wish to understand how." Her words lingered in the air, strange but oddly sincere. Daniel offered her a small smile. "Well, you've got 6 months. Hope you don't regret picking me as your human subject." Lyra blinked again, her expression unreadable. "Regret. I do not yet know that emotion." That night, Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He could hear faint sounds from the other room, her careful footsteps, the soft hum of her voice as she spoke to some small glowing device. He couldn't believe it. There was an actual alien in his apartment. But more than surprise, there was something else. A feeling he hadn't known in months. Curiosity. He wanted to know more about her. About where she came from. About how she saw humans. As for Lyra, she sat by the window, watching the rain fall outside. Her silver eyes reflected the lights of the city below. In her mind, she recorded her first observation. Human subjects live surrounded by loneliness. Their homes echo with silence. Yet even in that emptiness, they seek connection. They fear being alone, but they also fear being seen. She paused, looking toward Daniel's closed door. Something strange stirred within her. A faint warmth, a soft ache she couldn't name. Perhaps, she thought, this study will be more difficult than I expected. And in that small, silent apartment, 2 worlds had just collided. One of logic, one of emotion.
Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were about to change forever. Lyra's first few days on Earth were filled with questions.
Not the usual kind humans asked, but strange ones that made Daniel stop and think. She would stand in front of the TV and ask, "Why do humans cry when the people on screen are not real?" Or when Daniel smiled at a funny commercial, she'd tilt her head. Is laughter a defense reaction or an expression of bonding? At first, Daniel thought it was cute, like having a curious child around. But soon he realized she wasn't joking. She was studying him. Every gesture, every expression. She carried a small metallic device that glowed whenever she spoke into it. Observation log. Human male exhibits micro-expressions when speaking about his mother. Possible sign of emotional memory. Daniel groaned one evening. Lyra, can you please not narrate my life like a documentary? She blinked at him with her silver eyes. I apologize. It helps me understand. He sighed, trying not to smile. Then at least try doing it quietly. She nodded seriously, and for the first time he saw something like embarrassment cross her face. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Over the next few weeks, she followed him everywhere. When he cooked, she watched closely, asking endless questions. Why do you season food differently each time? Do you not want consistent results? Because, Daniel said, laughing. Sometimes the best meals happen by accident. She frowned thoughtfully. So la chaos can create comfort? He nodded. Exactly. That's the human way. Lyra started helping him around the house too. She learned how to fold clothes, wash dishes, even water the plants. At first she did it mechanically, efficient, precise. But then Daniel noticed something strange. One morning she paused before watering the small fern by the window. She touched its leaves gently and smiled. It turns toward the light. It wants to live, Daniel froze. Yeah, it does. Something in her tone made his heart ache. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was understanding. But her curiosity wasn't always easy to handle. One evening, Daniel came home tired after a long day at work. He dropped onto the couch, rubbing his eyes. Lyra appeared beside him, holding a notepad. You are upset, she said quietly. Is it the social environment at your workplace? He chuckled weakly. Something like that. My boss yelled at me. Happens a lot, she frowned. Did you deserve it? Maybe, he admitted. But it still hurts. Lyra tilted her head, studying his face. Pain without injury. Emotional bruising, he laughed softly. That's one way to put it. Without saying a word, she disappeared into the kitchen. When she came back, she handed him a cup of hot tea. I read that warmth can comfort a sad mind, she said. Daniel stared at her for a moment, touched. You read that? Yes, she replied. But I also wanted to help. Her voice trembled slightly, like she wasn't used to admitting that. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept replaying that moment in his mind, the way she looked at him, the gentleness in her actions. She wasn't just observing anymore. She was learning to care. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra's behavior began to change. She laughed sometimes, softly, awkwardly, but honestly. When Daniel teased her, she'd frown in mock anger, pretending to be offended. Once, while watching a romantic movie, she turned to him suddenly. When people kiss, their heart rates increase, she said matter-of-factly. Is that why you blush? Daniel nearly choked on his popcorn. What? I'm not blushing. She stared at him, clearly analyzing. Your skin temperature has increased. Are you embarrassed? He groaned. You're impossible. Lyra smiled, a real warm smile this time. Then I am learning correctly. But late at night when Daniel was asleep, Lyra often sat by the window again, staring at the stars. She would touch her chest as if searching for something inside. Her voice would whisper softly into the recorder. Observation. I experience unfamiliar warmth when Daniel smiles. My sensors detect no illness. It is pleasant. Perhaps this is emotion. She paused, looking out at the glowing skyline. Humans are fragile, yet they choose to connect, even knowing it can hurt. I do not understand why, but I want to. She closed her eyes, feeling the echo of his laughter in her mind. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she wasn't just observing humanity, she was feeling it. And somewhere deep inside her, something new began to bloom, something that didn't belong to science or logic, something that made her heart, if she even had one, beat just a little faster when Daniel smiled at her the next morning. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel started noticing something different about Lyra. Her movements were softer now, less mechanical. She no longer spoke like a machine repeating data. There was emotion, small, fragile emotion in her words. When Daniel laughed, she would smile too. When he sighed, she would quietly look at him as if she could feel the heaviness in his chest. One cold evening, Daniel came home soaked from the rain. His jacket dripped water onto the floor and his hair stuck to his forehead. He looked completely drained. Lyra stood by the window, watching raindrops hit the glass, and turned when she heard the door. You are wet, she said calmly. Your temperature will drop. You should change. Yeah, Daniel muttered, kicking off his shoes. Rough day. I'll be fine. He collapsed onto the couch, closing his eyes. Moments later, he felt something warm around his shoulders. When he opened his eyes, Lyra was wrapping a blanket over him. I found this in the cupboard, she said. Humans comfort each other through warmth. I thought this might help. Daniel looked up at her and smiled tiredly. You're learning fast. She tilted her head, studying his face. I did not think, I just wanted you to feel better. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain outside and the faint hum of the heater. Lyra sat beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the soft light of the room. Daniel, she said quietly, I read about empathy. It means to feel what another feels. But when I see you sad, I do not just imagine your sadness, I feel it inside me. It hurts, why? Daniel took a deep breath. That's what it means to care about someone. You start to carry their pain like it's your own. She looked down at her hands. That sounds difficult. It is, he said softly. But it's also what makes us human. Lyra didn't answer, but that night she stayed up long after Daniel went to sleep, sitting on the floor near the couch. She watched him breathe, the rise and fall of his chest, the small smile that appeared even in his dreams. And though she didn't understand everything, she knew she wanted to protect that peace he had in those moments. Over the next few days, something beautiful began to grow between them. They started cooking together, Lyra learning how to make pancakes, though she once tried adding salt instead of sugar. Daniel had burst out laughing. Lyra, that's not how it's done. She looked offended, holding the spoon like a sword. You told me to experiment. Not like that. He laughed, but when he tasted the disastrous pancake, he couldn't stop smiling. It's terrible, but it's the thought that counts. Lyra watched him chew with a mix of pride and confusion. So effort is more valuable than perfection? He nodded. Exactly. That answer stayed with her all day. Later that week, Daniel had another hard day at work. His boss shouted at him, and a project he cared about was rejected. He came home angry, throwing his bag on the couch. Lyra was waiting there, sitting cross-legged, reading a book about human behavior. You are upset again, she said gently. Do you wish to talk? No, he muttered. Not right now. She nodded quietly and didn't push. Instead, she disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she came back holding a small plate. On it was a burnt pancake, shaped like a crooked heart. I thought this might make you smile, she said softly. Daniel stared at it, then at her. Something in his chest loosened. He laughed, really laughed this time. Lyra, you remembered. I remember many things, she said, her voice a whisper. But this one felt important. He took the plate, smiling at her. It is important. Lyra sat beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't take notes. She just watched his expression, her own heart, if she had one, beating faster than before. That night, as Daniel dozed off on the couch, Lyra whispered to her recording device again. Observation. I wanted to ease his sadness. My actions were not for data. They were instinctive. I think this is what humans call affection. She looked at him sleeping peacefully, a small smile on his face, and for the first time, she understood that emotions couldn't be studied. They had to be felt. She pressed her hand against her chest. There was a strange rhythm there, a soft, steady thump she had never noticed before. New discovery, she whispered. My heart responds when he smiles. And though she didn't yet know the word for it, Lyra was already falling into something that no science could ever measure. Something deeply, painfully, beautifully human. Lyra was changing slowly, beautifully, and unknowingly. What began as research had turned into something more. She no longer took notes every hour or measured Daniel's tone with her small scanner. Instead, she listened. She laughed with him, cooked with him, and sometimes sat beside him in silence that felt strangely peaceful. But there was still one thing she could not understand. Love. Humans spoke of it in songs, stories, and poems. Every movie she watched with Daniel ended with people crying, hugging, or kissing. And every time she would look at him and ask, why do humans cry when they are happy? Daniel would just smile. Because emotions are messy, Lyra. We feel too much, even when it hurts. She wanted to understand that too much. She wanted to feel it for herself. One afternoon, Lyra decided to do what she thought was a good experiment. Daniel had told her that love meant understanding another person completely, knowing what makes them happy, what hurts them, what they hide from others. So she started observing him more closely than ever. She followed him to his workplace, quietly, secretly. She wanted to see what made him sad there. She watched as his coworkers joked, laughed, and sometimes made fun of him behind his back. When his boss scolded him unfairly, she clenched her fists, her heart aching for reasons she didn't fully understand. Later that day, when Daniel's coworker invited her to lunch, just out of curiosity about the strange foreign girl who lived with Daniel, Lyra accepted. She thought this was a perfect way to learn more about him. During that lunch, Daniel's coworker laughed and said, "So you're the alien roommate, huh? Must be hard living with a guy like Daniel. He's a bit of a mess," Lyra frowned. "Daniel is not a mess. He is kind and lonely. He hides it well." The man raised an eyebrow. "He told you that?" Lyra shook her head. "No, I observed it." Later, that coworker told Daniel everything. When Daniel came home that evening, his face was red with anger. "Lyra," he said sharply, "why did you tell my coworkers about me? About my feelings?" Lyra blinked, confused. "I only spoke the truth. I wanted them to understand you better. Humans connect through honesty, don't they?" He laughed bitterly. "No, Lyra, that's not how it works. You can't just tell people things I never shared. That's private." Her voice faltered. "But I was trying to help." "Help?" Daniel interrupted. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You told them things I've never said out loud." Lyra's silver eyes shimmered. "I thought that was how humans show care." Daniel sighed heavily, running his hands through his hair. "No, Lyra. Caring isn't about exposing someone. It's about respecting their feelings." There was silence between them, heavy and cold. Lyra looked down, her voice trembling. "I made you angry. I failed the study." Daniel softened a little but still turned away. "It's not about your study anymore, Lyra. It's about trust." She whispered, "I thought I understood you." "But I don't." He didn't answer. He just walked into his room and closed the door. That night, Lyra stood by the window staring out into the darkness. The city lights blurred in her silver eyes. Inside her chest, something hurt. Not the physical kind, but deeper, sharper. "Observation," she whispered into her recorder. "I caused Daniel pain." His voice changed, his heartbeat quickened. "My own system feels unstable. Perhaps this is guilt. Or sorrow." She pressed her palm against her chest, confused by the ache that wouldn't go away. For the first time since coming to Earth, she wished she could cry, but tears did not come easily for her kind. When morning came, Daniel found her sitting on the floor near the balcony. She looked exhausted. Her hair was duller, her eyes dim. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I only wanted to understand how love works." Daniel sighed, sitting beside her. "Love isn't a formula, Lyra. It's not something you can measure. It's about trust, patience, and respect. Sometimes even silence means care." She looked at him, her voice breaking slightly. "Then I failed to love correctly." He smiled faintly, his anger melting away. "No, you're learning. And learning means making mistakes." She blinked, surprised. "Then you forgive me?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah. You're not just my roommate anymore, Lyra. You're my friend." She smiled, softly, uncertainly. But it was enough. "Observation," she whispered to herself later that day. "Forgiveness feels like light after darkness." And though she didn't realize it yet, something deeper was growing between them, something neither of them could stop nor fully understand. For Lyra, this was no longer an experiment. It was the beginning of something real. After that argument, the air in the apartment changed. The laughter that once filled the small rooms had disappeared. The TV stayed off, and the warmth between them turned into quiet, uncomfortable distance. Lyra spoke less now. She still helped around the house, still did everything right, but her eyes were different. The bright silver in them had turned pale, like clouds covering the moon. Daniel noticed it every day. He wanted to say something, to fix things, but guilt kept holding his tongue. Every time he tried, the words felt too heavy. One morning, he found her sitting by the window again. She didn't look up when he came into the room. She was watching the street below, people walking, laughing, living. He stood there for a moment before saying softly, "You've been quiet lately." Lyra didn't turn around. "I am thinking About what? About leaving, she said simply. Daniel froze. Leaving? What do you mean? She finally looked at him, her voice steady but empty. The exchange program will end soon. My report is almost complete. I have learned much about humans, your emotions, your mistakes, your kindness. Perhaps it is time to return home. Her words hit him like a punch. He hadn't realized how much space she had taken in his life until that moment. The small things, like how she hummed while making tea, or how her laughter made his apartment feel alive again. Lyra, he said softly, you don't have to go yet. You can stay longer. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. That would not be logical. I came here to study. The study is done. Daniel stepped closer, his voice quiet. Is that all this was for you? Just a study? Lyra hesitated, her eyes trembling. At first, yes, but then I started to feel things I cannot explain. When you laugh, I feel light. When you're sad, I ache. I thought I understood humans, but now I only feel confused. He took a deep breath. That confusion? That's what being human means. We never really understand our feelings, we just live through them. Lyra looked down. It hurts to feel. I know, Daniel said softly. But it also means you care. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't angry anymore. It was sad, fragile, full of words left unsaid. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The thought of her leaving wouldn't leave his mind. He realized how much she had changed his life. Before Lyra, his days were dull, cold, and lonely. But after she came, every small thing, coffee in the morning, rain on the window, even silence, had meaning. He walked to the living room. Lyra was there again, sitting by the dim light, her small glowing device on her lap. She was recording something. Her voice was quiet but full of feeling. Observation. Humans fear loneliness more than pain. But perhaps the two are the same. When I think of leaving Daniel, my system reacts as if injured. My chest tightens. I wish to stay, but I do not belong here. Daniel's throat tightened. You belong here more than you think, he said softly. Lyra turned around in surprise. You heard? He nodded. Yeah, and you're wrong. You do belong here, Lyra. Maybe not as part of a program, but as part of my life. Her eyes shimmered. Your life? He smiled weakly. I didn't realize it before, but you make this place feel alive. You make me feel alive. Lyra's lips parted slightly, and for the first time Daniel saw tears forming in her eyes. Not glowing, not metallic. Real, human-like tears. I thought I was broken, she whispered. But maybe this is what it means to truly live. He stepped closer and gently wiped one of her tears away. Then don't leave yet. Stay, not because of duty, but because you want to. She looked into his eyes, searching for truth. And if I stay, what happens then? Daniel smiled softly. Then we stop studying life and start living it. The next morning, Lyra unpacked the small case she had prepared. She placed her glowing recorder back on the shelf and said quietly, Observation. Humans do not run from feelings. They grow through them. Daniel laughed softly. That's a good observation. Lyra turned to him, her silver eyes brighter again. Then I will stay, not as your research partner, but as your friend. He nodded, though deep down he knew what he felt was already more than friendship. And as sunlight filled the room, Lyra smiled for real, warm, human, and alive. The distance between them slowly faded, replaced by a quiet connection neither of them could name yet, but both could feel. For Daniel, she was no longer just a roommate. For Lyra, Earth was no longer just an assignment. It was home. Days passed softly after Lyra decided to stay. The air around them felt different now, gentler, warmer. Daniel noticed how she moved around the apartment with quiet purpose, humming softly to herself while preparing breakfast or reading books on human culture. She was no longer just observing. She was living. One morning, Daniel found her in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee. She was watching the steam rise as if it carried a secret. He smiled. You look like you're solving the mysteries of the universe again. She looked up and smiled faintly. In a way, I am. I was wondering why this simple drink makes humans so peaceful. Because it reminds us of warmth, Daniel said, sitting down. It's not the drink, really. It's the feeling that comes with it. Lyra thought about it. A feeling created by memory? He nodded. Exactly. It's like holding on to comfort. She took a sip, her expression softening. Then maybe I like coffee too. Daniel laughed quietly. Welcome to humanity. That afternoon, they went outside together for the first time in weeks. Lyra wore a simple scarf, her glowing eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. The world was loud and full of people, but she didn't seem afraid. Instead, she watched everything with wonder. Children playing with snow, couples holding hands, people laughing at a street musician. It all fascinated her. Daniel, she said, her voice almost a whisper. When two humans hold hands, what does it mean? He looked at her, surprised. It can mean a lot of things, comfort, protection, or just love. She tilted her head slightly. Love. I keep reading that word, but I still don't understand it. Daniel took a deep breath. It's not something you learn by reading, Lyra. It's something you feel. Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment, silent and thoughtful. Then she nodded. Then I will try to feel it. Over the next few days, Lyra changed in small, beautiful ways. She started laughing more, real laughter, not practiced or studied. She began asking deep emotional questions about why humans cry during movies, why they hug when they're sad, and why heartbreak hurts more than physical pain. Daniel answered as best he could, but sometimes words failed. Sometimes all he could do was smile and let her figure it out on her own. One evening, the power went out during a storm. They sat together in the dark, the sound of rain echoing against the windows. Lyra looked out at the flashing sky. On my world, she said softly, storms are rare. But when they happen, the sky glows blue. We hide until it ends. Here, Daniel said, we watch them. They're loud and messy, but somehow beautiful. Lyra turned to him. The candlelight made her silver eyes shine like stars. You humans always find beauty in chaos. That's how we survive, he said. A quiet moment passed between them. Then Lyra reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold at first, but slowly warmed against his skin. Like this? She asked softly. Is this what holding hands means? Daniel's heart skipped. He wanted to pull away, but didn't. Yeah, he said quietly. That's exactly it. She smiled, a small, curious smile. It feels strange, but not bad, he chuckled. That's how it starts. In the following days, their connection deepened in ways neither could explain. Daniel taught her how to cook simple meals, and Lyra taught him how to listen, to really listen, not with ears, but with presence. Sometimes they would talk late into the night about the universe, about fear, about belonging. Lyra confessed that on her world, emotions were considered distractions, flaws to be controlled. But here, she said, looking at him, they feel like the reason for everything. Daniel nodded. That's because they are, she smiled softly. Then I think I'm starting to understand love. It's not perfect. It's confusing, but it's alive. Daniel felt his chest tighten. That's the best definition I've ever heard. One evening, Lyra surprised him. She handed him her glowing research device and said quietly, I deleted my report. He blinked. What? Why would you do that? Because, she said, voice trembling, I realized I don't want to study humans anymore. I want to be one. I don't want to write about feelings, I want to live them. And when I'm with you, I feel human. Daniel didn't know what to say. He just looked at her, seeing not an alien anymore, but someone who had learned what it meant to have a heart. Lyra stepped closer. You once said love can't be studied. You were right, but maybe it can be shared. Her words sank deep into him like a quiet truth. He smiled faintly and said, Then share it with me, Lyra. She nodded slowly, her silver eyes shimmering with warmth. I already am. That night, as the city slept, Lyra stood by the window again, just like the first day she arrived. But this time she wasn't observing from a distance. This time she belonged. Her heart, once mechanical and cold, now beat with something real, something human. And Daniel, watching her from across the room, realized he had found something too. Not just a roommate, but the reason his world finally felt alive again. The message arrived on a quiet morning. Lyra was sitting at the small kitchen table when her device glowed softly, a color Daniel had never seen before. She stared at it in silence, her silver eyes reflecting the light. What is it? Daniel asked gently. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. It's a transmission from my world. They're calling me back. The words hung in the air like cold rain. Daniel froze, his heart sinking. He had known this day would come, but knowing didn't make it hurt any less. "Oh," he said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "When?" 2 days, she whispered. "The transport will arrive in 2 days." Daniel nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "That's fast." Lyra looked down. "I knew this would happen, but I didn't expect it to feel this heavy." He said nothing. He just stood there watching her, afraid that if he spoke, he'd break. That night, the apartment was quiet again, like it had been in the beginning. But it wasn't the same. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the wall, memories flashing through his mind. Her laughter, her questions, the way she'd watched the rain as if learning to feel it. Lyra sat near the window, her favorite spot. The city lights reflected in her eyes. She looked almost human now, fragile, emotional, real. "Daniel," she said softly, "do you regret letting me stay?" He looked up, surprised. "No, never," she smiled faintly. "Even if I leave?" "Even then," he said. "You changed my life, Lyra. You made me remember what it means to care about someone again." Lyra's voice broke as she said, "On my world, we don't keep attachments. We move forward always. But now the idea of leaving you feels wrong." He took a deep breath. "Maybe that's because you've learned the hardest part of being human." She looked at him with soft confusion. "What part is that?" "Letting go," he whispered. Lyra's eyes shimmered with emotion. She looked away quickly, as if afraid to cry. The next day passed in slow motion. Lyra packed her few belongings carefully. Daniel helped, even though every movement felt like tearing a piece of himself away. They didn't talk much. Every word felt too final, too painful. As the sun began to set, Lyra turned to him. "Will you remember me?" Daniel smiled sadly. "How could I ever forget you?" She hesitated, then reached out and touched his face, her fingers trembling. Humans remember through emotion. Maybe that's why it hurts so much to love. He covered her hand with his. "Love always hurts, Lyra, but it's worth it." For a long time, they just stood there, two beings from different worlds, sharing a silence that said everything words couldn't. The next morning, the transport ship arrived. A beam of pale light shimmered down into the street outside, silent and beautiful. Lyra stood at the door, her small bag on her shoulder. She looked at Daniel, her expression torn between duty and longing. "I have to go," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "I know." But before she could step outside, she turned back. "Daniel, before I leave, I want to say something I finally understand." He met her eyes, waiting. She took a small breath. "Love isn't about studying. It's about feeling. It's about wanting someone to be happy even if it hurts you." Her voice trembled as she continued. "And if that's true, then I think I love you." Daniel felt his heart break and heal at the same time. He stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace. For a moment, everything stopped, the city, the world, the stars. "I love you too," he whispered. "More than you'll ever know." Lyra stepped back slowly, tears glimmering in her silver eyes. Then, without another word, she walked into the beam of light. It rose silently, carrying her away, up through the gray clouds, vanishing into the endless sky. Daniel stood there long after she was gone. The air was cold, the world empty again. But something inside him had changed. He went back inside. On the table, her small glowing device was still there. When he touched it, it came to life and played her last message. Observation. Humans love even when they know they might lose. Perhaps that is what makes them strong. If I could choose, I would stay. Daniel smiled through his tears. He whispered softly to the empty room. "You're still here, Lyra. You'll always be here." Months later, Daniel still looked up at the stars every night. And sometimes when the wind was calm, he thought he heard her voice, gentle, curious, full of life. She had come to study humans. But in the end, she had become one, and in her heart, somewhere among the stars, she carried with her the greatest discovery of all. That love, no matter where you come from, is what makes a species truly human. The end.